Hey everybody, welcome back to Post Status Draft. This is an interview in the series of product people that we're doing with some of the great product companies in WordPress. And today I have my new friend, Tiffany. We got to talk a couple weeks back, and I love her energy, her experience, her approach to WordPress overall. She's very distinguished, experienced person in WordPress, having done some cool stuff that I'm gonna let her talk about. But we're going to be talking about Nexcess and Store Builder today, I think. So, Tiffany, welcome to Draft Podcast.
Thanks, Cory.
Can you tell us what you do, what you do in WordPress now, and where you got to this point?
Okay. Well, so right now I am the product manager for WordPress eCommerce at Nexcess, which is basically I have my hands in the entire experience of using WordPress on our platform as an e-commerce focused host. That's a pretty wide swim lane, so I do a lot of different things. The thing that I've been focusing on is our Store Builder product. Before Nexcess, I was at Automatic for a while I was on their special projects team, which works with interesting people and organizations to try and make sure they have a great experience on WordPress. So I did a lot of sort of very bespoke projects there. Before that, I freelanced, was kind of doing what a lot of my colleagues are doing, is just trying to, help my clients have, by setting up like WordPress sites for them and things like that. And before that, I was doing a lot of WordPress, just kind of in personal projects. I started teaching myself WordPress in 2004. So I've been with WordPress almost as long as WordPress has been WordPress, which is fun, like to see how far we've come as a community and as a piece of software, right?
We're going to have to talk about that later. I'm going to come back to that because you predate me. I was just a blogger in 2006 on this cool thing called WordPress. But you said this as part of, I know you're so humble, but I want to accentuate a part of this. Like that special projects team you did at Automatic is known for doing the big, glamorous, cool sites with potential big problems attached to them. And I can't remember what the code name for the team is called, but I knew about it for years. And then when we met a couple months ago, and you told me your background, I was like, you were on that team? Because it's very, I would say like, a celebrity status in my sense, because I know I'd go to this blog site or this cool site and realize it was on WordPress, or somebody would say, now this is on WordPress. And you kind of dig into the details and you go, it's that team at Automatic that was doing it that you were a part of for such a long time.
Yeah, I was there for it was a couple of years. And I worked on some very, very cool projects, and it's kind of like WordPress boot camp, right? Like if you don't, whatever you think you know about WordPress, you will know more after like 6 months on that team. Because we solved like every WordPress problem there is, right? Like sometimes you're rescuing a site from a developer that maybe didn't do a great job. Sometimes you're converting a site that isn't on WordPress to WordPress. Like a project that I worked on that is very close to my heart that I can talk about is I worked on the conversion of a list apart from Expression Engine to WordPress, which was just an incredible experience. I learned so much, and the list apart team was super great. So like that was an intense couple of years. Like there's a lot that goes into those projects, and our job was to kind of make it. It was like the metaphor of the duck, right? Like you're swimming serenely, except underneath you're like furiously paddling. And like that's the special projects team.
Can you say the special code name for it? I want to say
every team at Automatic has like an internal nickname, right? Like the name, because the names of teams at Automatic have historically not been there isn't just like, oh, that's accounts payable. Like that's right. Not what any of the teams are called, right? They all have like clever names. Special projects team is the overarching team is called Team 51. And there are a lot of rumors about why that was chosen. All of them are more glamorous and interesting than the real reason it was chosen. But now Team 51 has actually, like when I was there, it was like 13 people, but it's now like 40 some people. And so there's lots of sub teams, and those sub teams all have names and things like that as well. So, but the overarching team internally is called Team 51.
This is why I wanted to do these set of interviews, because there's people oftentimes behind the scenes with these vast experiences building the cool products that so many people use, and why I wanted to highlight your background when we got to talk. I was like, oh, I've got to share this because I think it's so compelling to see. One, you've been doing WordPress for a very long time. Two, you did it with this like very interesting team doing some cool projects that really put a great face on WordPress. Like A List Apart, so many people in our community know that like the back of their hands. So I want to share that because I think that all formulates these compelling stories into today in your role at Nexcess and what you're doing, and formulates all this background. Like I remember at iThemes, there's so many times where we're building cool stuff, but people don't see inside the workshop. They don't see all the stuff. They don't know all the history and background, the care and passion that goes into this. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing this and why I wanted to like point it out, Okay, so that brings us to today. And now you're at Nexcess doing Store Builder of many things, but I really want to talk about Store Builder because I think it's really interesting. I know you've been focusing on it at Nexcess, and there's a big problem that I think it solves for my own work. I shouldn't even say work, trying to use this thing called WooCommerce, which is incredible. What I think I've said, at least, and you correct me, Tiffany, but I'm like, WooCommerce is the default e-commerce software on the planet because it's used so broadly. I think it's growing faster still than WordPress, and for good reason. But you can do anything and everything with it, and that presents a lot of complexity.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
What is the problem you're trying to solve with Store Builder?
Sure. Oh, well, so as you say, like the more flexible and powerful something is, the more complicated it is. And, something that I learned, and this, I think, especially I learned at on special projects, is that, setting up WordPress and WooCommerce, that's a different set of skills than just using them day to day. And the problem is that people who like, once the site is set up, right, people can learn to use it. It's not that hard to use. But getting to that point where you can just use it and run your business on it requires a ton of knowledge. And you know how WordPress is, like, it likes to hide all of the settings, like in all of these different menus, and you have to kind of know what you're looking for in order to find it. And that's a real challenge for people. So the problem that we're trying to solve with Store Builder is this idea of like, okay, there's like 5 or 6 things you have to do in order to go from zero to a store. And we want to like gather those all up in one place and just walk you through them in a very logical way. So, okay, first we're doing like what we call first time configuration. You're setting like the name and address of the store and the name of the site. And then we want to do look and feel. So let's just get some pages into your site. Let's get some content into your site that you can edit and make your own. Then we want to let's add a domain. We've got this very cool, we call it the Go Live Wizard, where you just, where it walks you through the process of connecting a domain right there from inside WP Admin. And then we've got, okay, great. Now it's time to add your products. Products we don't have a wizard for. We're just sort of surfacing a lot of help content to just help people make good choices as they're configuring their products. And then it's like, great, now let's connect your payment. Now let's set up your shipping. Hey, congratulations, you have a store. Is there more work to do on the site? Of course there is. There's always more work to do. But now we have gotten to a point where you have products and you can take payment and you can ship them, and your site has a domain name and therefore an SSL certificate. So here you are, now you're in business on the web. And that's the problem that we're really trying to solve, is just like, let's just get all of these things that you have to configure in front of people so they don't have to go hunting for them.
And that's a huge problem. I see that firsthand. WordPress enabled me to start a business, start a blog first, and then it evolved into a business. And that's the beauty of it. And I see that with WooCommerce, like nearly any nuanced thing you want to do, you can probably do it with WooCommerce. There's so many extensions, plugins, and add-ons and stuff. But from my experience, it seems like, you get in and e-commerce, just set aside from WooCommerce, is just complex because, okay, well, you're selling in Europe and you need VAT and you need invoices or something like that. You're selling, a digital good with a physical product and you want a free trial. I was just talking to somebody about that yesterday. So the whole thing on e-commerce, and then you get to WooCommerce, great tool, awesome ecosystem and stuff. And I see this problem that you're trying to tackle over and over. And I think it provides a huge need for those trying to build stores on the web. Tell me about who the product is really for.
So, this product is really for that sort of like merchant who is either setting up the site themselves, or maybe they're working with somebody to set up, but they're not like hiring an agency to build them a site, right? Like they might have a buddy who's good with computers, or they might even have paid a freelancer, but it's really meant to be kind of right at that like level of the person who is actually going to be running the business should be able to set up the store. That's always the goal that we're after, right? Is if you decide, if you're like knitting hats and selling them on Etsy and you decide you want to get off of Etsy, like you should be able to do this. So it's meant for people whose skill is whatever it is that their business is, not building websites. And that's who we're really targeting with this. Now, that is a very complicated problem and there's a lot of layers to it. And so we are always in the process of trying to solve for that use case. I think, I don't know if you can never say, we've solved it, right? Like there's always going to be more to do. And that's what we're doing with Store Builder right now, but that's who that's for. Like a lot of our other products, like we have managed WooCommerce hosting, managed WordPress hosting. What we like to say about those products is that we're the host that you graduate to, right? If you're coming to us, you've probably already been somewhere else. But with Store Builder, we're really focusing on people who probably don't already have a website. And that's who the product's for.
And that's unique with Nexcess, but I know Nexcess is a brand company, has extensive experience with e-commerce too. And this offering is really interesting because one, you're tackling a big problem. But two, you've got a lot of experience on your team and the company that has really dealt with this, the e-commerce question for a long time.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, and it's such a privilege to be able to work with people who like really think about e-commerce, right? Like Nexcess got its start doing Magento. And so like we have a lot of like all of our, engineering and our operations, like they understand like what an e-commerce site needs. And so it's been great to watch them kind of apply that knowledge to WordPress and Woo as well.
excuse me, and I think this is it's one thing to have a blog. When I have a blog, I didn't worry too much about downtime. When you have
Sure.
downtime or something happens and you can't get things done with your store, you're probably likely losing money. So
Absolutely.
I think that experience is key to highlight Magento, going back to the days, this big behemoth of an e-commerce platform that switched hands, and hearing that back from Nexus is great. So you said this just a second ago, but you talked about some of the things like what you're trying to do, and you mentioned some key things in the last year or so as you've led this project. What are some of the things that stand out that you're excited about, proud about, that you can share?
I think in terms of like actual product features, I'm so proud of that Go Live Wizard, because like, what's the saying? Like it's always DNS, right? DNS is hard. And there's no way to talk about it in a way that isn't like technical, right? How do you connect a domain name to your site? Well, you've got to go change your name servers. Well, what's a name server? What's a CNAME? What's an A record? People shouldn't have to know that, right? Like people shouldn't have to know that in order to get online. I think, so it's been really fun to kind of build this cool tool that just walks people kind of through a decision tree. The first thing it asks you is like, do you have a domain name or do you need one? And if you need one, it'll send you out to the Nexcess checkout, or we're working on this feature where it'll send you out to the Nexcess checkout. We're working on the feature where it brings you back into your store. Like right now we can send you out to our domain registration, but we have to rely on you to come back. We're working on a feature where we can move you out and then just bring you right back to where you left off. But so that's the first question. And then like once you have it, it will actually validate whether your domain is ready to connect, right? It'll do all the queries to see like, are your name servers set, or do you have the CNAME set up? And it'll tell you, if not, it'll tell you what it is that you need to do. And then, as you proceed with it, it'll like set up the DNS zone in your portal, and it will like do the find and replace on your database to make sure that like WordPress knows what domain it's supposed to be using, and that all of your internal links are now referring to the correct domain. So like it does all of those like little things that like on special projects, we have a whole checklist for to make sure that a human does them. Well, now we've got like a script. So that does that. And I actually tease my former coworkers sometimes, and I'm like, hey, I'm over here trying to replace special projects with a series of onboarding wizards. And they're like, yeah, good luck with that. I'm like, hey, look, I never said I liked small problems, right? So but so that feature is something that I'm really, really proud of and excited about. And I'm always telling people it's like the best single piece of Store Builder.
Is this different from the wizard you mentioned a bit ago?
It's the same one. I mean,
Okay.
it's that's the one that I'm most excited about. And I think it's the reason that we're able to do that one so beautifully is because you don't have to there isn't like a third party that we're having to connect with. When you start getting into like payments and shipping, like suddenly you're dealing with other people's APIs. And so there's a limit to what you can do. But like where we're able to kind of control the experience, we're able to make it like really beautiful and functional.
Because I know I've helped people, you know how it is. I'm sure you get this too. It's like if they know you do WordPress or websites, everybody has some kind of idea. And there's platforms out there, but again, the power of WooCommerce and WordPress, particularly to grow your business. But there's complexity that happens that I know you're wiring in as you think about and continue to build the product for that experience. It's kind of going back for a second. I know Nexcess does, okay, you graduate to us. StoreBidder specifically, I think, is for a different kind of problem. And you might have said this, but I want to come back to it because I think I might have missed sharing this part of it. So Store Builder, if you want to start a store and here are 15 options, this is the option if you want to start a store and grow it online. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's no better platform than WordPress and Woo for something that's going to grow with your business and be flexible to your business. Like maybe you get farther down the road and you decide, you know what, I don't actually want to sell merchandise anymore. What I would rather do is do courses or events. I mean, all right, well, just install another plugin. You can uninstall WooCommerce, off you go. And so, having that option always available to people as well is really important. Like you can, because as you know, it's so flexible and you can just swap in the pieces you need and take out the pieces you don't. I think it's really great to just get people like, just get on the platform that's going to grow with you at the beginning instead of having to like migrate later, right? Like nobody likes migrations. Nobody likes, having to convert their data and carry their orders from like their Shopify store into their WooCommerce. Just start with WooCommerce. It's fine.
I know. So we talked about in that experience, like really making that initial experience when you're like, I've got something I want to sell online. You mentioned when we were talking before this too, like particularly you're on another platform like an Etsy or some other platform. This is when you're ready to go, and there's this learning curve with WordPress, WooCommerce that you're trying to sort out. I think you said it when we were prepping for this. It's like idea to selling is kind of that key, which I think is so awesome because I know from experience having people, non-WordPress related go, I'm ready to do this. Lindsay and I, my wife, have a partner, great founder who does physical products. And that was the question. I was like, okay, well, you have a couple of options. They all have pros and cons. They have some things. But having an experience like this, I think is so key because of that initial learning curve going live online. But I know there's other things too, because Nexcess happens to be in the family of Liquid Web, which has a number of WordPress specific company outside of the Nexcess brand of families that you all leverage within the platform too.
Yes, absolutely. The biggest, the Liquid Web family of brands is large and growing, right? And as our post status friends know, there are quite a lot of like WordPress plugin businesses that are now part of the family of brands. And the one that we are leveraging most right now in Store Builder is Kadence. And Kadence, for those who don't know, is this really great, I don't want to call it, it's a theme, but it's like so much more than a theme, right? It is a theme, it is blocks, it is starter templates, it's this whole package, and it's really geared around people who are like web designers, but just need a great way to build and customize a site that doesn't necessarily rely on like a third-party page builder, right? Something I appreciate about Kadence is the way it sort of embraces and extends the WordPress block editor rather than trying to replace it. Kadence is there's so much great stuff, right? Like right now, Store Builder really leverages this Kadence starter template. So you pick one of the starter templates around eCommerce, and we import a site for you basically. And then you just have to edit it and make it your own, replace the images, replace the text. But the feedback that we're getting from our customers is that that's still a lot of work. And it is. their feedback is that because they are correct, that is still a lot of work to do. And so something that kind of the next problem we're trying to tackle in Store Builder is this idea of editing all the not store parts of your site, making sure that you have a home page and an about page and, all of your policy pages and things like that, and making it as easy as possible for people, because, Kadence was kind of designed around people who are already web designers, and that isn't who our audience is. And so we've been working very closely with the Kadence team on, how can we leverage Kadence and the power and the experience that they have, but create like a really great experience for people who aren't already savvy with web design, right? Who don't know, like, what is a gutter? What's a border radius? Like, no one should have to know that. So that's the next problem that we're trying to solve. And it's been a real privilege to work with my colleagues over on that side of the house on that.
You just kind of like highlighted one of the benefits why our partner and the founder of that physical product company, like why not just to use, let's say, a Shopify site or something, is like the stuff you said, that the non-store stuff is so awesome and attractive and helpful for store owners, where you can blog and get SEO and different things like that. And I happen to have some inside knowledge as far as having been at Liquid Web a couple of years ago, sold iThemes to Liquid Web, that there's a suite of tools that's awesome. And to see, Post Ads, by the way, also runs Kadence, and such a powerful framework, whatever we call it, WordPress.
Yeah, it's a suite, a package. I don't know. It's a theme, but it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff. And it's just great. And it's been really nice to be able to work with something that both kind of embraces kind of the WordPress way of doing things, but also really enhances and expands it.
Okay, so help me complete this sentence. As product lead for this particular product, there's probably all these things that your team knows inside and out, because you built them, and you built them based on this journey of these problems and obstacles people ran into. I wish people knew or did about what as part of Store Builder. Is there things from, like, your team just goes, gosh, they're not taking advantage of this cool feature. They're not doing this one thing that would make their life easier. The business would grow better. What are some of those things as part of the platform that's come to mind?
Oh, that's a hard one. I mean, I think the thing that I find is that the thing that I always want customers to know is usually they don't know it because I haven't adequately conveyed it to them. So it seems a little bit almost self-serving, right? To be like, oh, I wish they knew. Like, one thing that I always find myself wishing that people knew is that e-commerce is really complicated, right? Because I think sometimes we get people who come to us to Store Builder and expect us to solve all of the complexity of e-commerce, when what we're really able to solve is like the complexity of the website part. Like, I read our one of the things I do as a product manager is I read all of our cancellation reasons. So like, anytime somebody has left the product and they want to tell me why, it's hard reading sometimes. It's very bad for the ego, but it's very good for the product. And somebody once said, well, I can't believe how many things I have to log into to use this. Like, okay, well, if you're talking about like our Nexcess portal, like, I agree with you. I would love to reduce the need for people to have to log into a web hosting portal, right? But if you're talking about payments, shipping, like, was there ever a future where you weren't going to need a Stripe account? I know some people are tackling that by like building their own payments, but then I feel like that's another form of lock-in that I don't love.
Right.
So, so a thing that I want people to know is that the system we're trying to balance like that, like opinionated versus like freedom thing, right? Like, can we be very opinionated? Like, look, you're just going to use, this is the payment system you're going to use. Just while also still giving people that freedom of WooCommerce. I think that's always like, when I'm reading stuff, that's always what I'm wishing people knew. And so now it's just a question of like, well, how do I teach them that? It's not their fault they don't know that. I know that. They don't know that. I think about e-commerce all day. All you want to do is just get online and like sell this thing you made.
Sell your stuff.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and I know there's platforms out there like Shopify, for instance, and it's super fast, get something going, but the complexity exists of some of these things. Like you got to think through, are you selling to Europe? What do you, that's just one that comes to mind for me.
Exactly.
But I totally get it. The space that you all are in, what the product you're trying to provide, that is kind of like a pro and con of the beauty of the web. You can, with Store Builder, with WordPress, with WooCommerce, get a store up and going. So you can do it. And that's a great freedom that we have and enjoy for sure. But that I know from having had obviously businesses that run e-commerce, rely on e-commerce, our website was our front door to our store. If it was down, we didn't make money. And then trying to help navigate some of those complexities is a pretty tough job. Okay. Anything else that kind of comes out to mind?
About what I wish people knew?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so many things, all the things. If they knew too
anything
much,
about
I guess they wouldn't need Store Builder.
And anything about the product that we haven't mentioned that you want to share too?
I mean, I think we've covered all the things that I'm like most passionate about. Like I just, you remember that controversy several months ago about Etsy and like Etsy's increase in fees, and people were closing down their Etsy stores. And I want people to know that it doesn't have to be that way. Like it doesn't have to be that way. Like you can own you can own your platform. We're seeing this now with Twitter, right? The implosion of Twitter. People are like, what are we going to do? Where are we going to go? And I'm like, you should have a blog is what you should do. I think I want people to know that it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have like our presences on the web, which is an increasingly important way that we conduct business, the way we conduct our relationships, the way we meet new people. Like we don't have to, it doesn't have to be that way, right? You can own your home on the web, whether that home is a store or just a blog or anything else. Like it doesn't have to be this way. It can be better. There are many of us who would love to help you with it. And I'm not saying that just as a person who wants to sell store builders. I want to sell store builders, but I want to sell, the reason that I care about Store Builder is because what it allows people to do.
Absolutely. You backed into a question I was going to ask you next, which is you've been in WordPress a long time. And, when we prop up examples like, I don't want to just poo-poo Shopify, but use Shopify, software as a service. There's benefits to having a SaaS kind of solution for what you're doing. But there's also
a reason they're successful.
Absolutely. There's also downside. And you mentioned earlier, it's like WooCommerce, WordPress, and even Store Builder and Nexcess grows with you. But I want you to share a little bit more about that. Like, Shopify, what I was telling our partner, I said, Shopify is the glamorous thing people look at, and I see why. But I said, you're going to trade some problems for a new set of problems. And one of those you've mentioned a couple of times is lock-in. And the beauty of, I want you to share a little bit about what your thoughts are around WordPress, WooCommerce, and open source.
Yeah, I think the number one biggest one is that you can own it and you can go, wherever you want, and you can decide the experience that you want to have. I think that's something that a lot of us are spending a lot of time thinking about right now, as like various social media platforms, or like the downsides of, like, for example, kind of lock-in in social media platforms is becoming apparent, right? So that's like one thing that I think is really important. Another thing that's important is that, the thing about, like, there are lots of companies in WordPress, and yes, here we all are trying to sell you our solution, right? We're all trying to make money. We're all trying to, everybody, we live in capitalism. We're all trying to make money here. But at the same time, like, there is no reason that you have to have any of that, right? Like the only thing that you have to pay for to use WordPress is someplace to put it, right? You can download it, you can use it. It's all free, and that you can decide what you need. And then, what's worth paying for versus what's worth not paying for. Like it's such a choose your own adventure kind of platform. And I feel like, we've had so much centralization and so much, it's just so much centralization, so much like merging, and like this company buys this company, that we kind of forget that, like, we don't have to be that way. And I think it's really important. I think open source is really important to like individual autonomy in that way. Like we're starting to get a little like philosophical here, but I think, just knowing that, like, if nothing else, you can just go download WordPress and learn to use it. Like I started downloading WordPress and learning to use it because movable type was going to a for pay model, and it was more money than I could pay at that time to indulge my like personal blog habit. And everybody was talking about this new system WordPress that was open source and free. And I was like, free is good because I am broke. And I downloaded it and I started teaching myself to use it, and it completely changed my life. And I know I'm not the only one, right? I have talked to other people who are like, great, WordPress was free for me to learn to use, so I learned to use it. WordCamp was $20 for me to go, so I slept on somebody's couch and went to a WordCamp. Something that I think is so important is that kind of low financial barrier to entry. I would love to see us have a lower like knowledge barrier to entry, and I think we're all working on that every day. But that's just like that barrier to entry, I think, is always really close to my heart, because I really believe that, you know, these are things that can change people's lives if they just have what they need in order to take advantage of them. And I think that the community really does care about that. And that's something that's like makes me very proud to be involved in WordPress.
Well, you just, there's a practical side to this too. And I love the philosophical because it has practical implications as well. It's like you
Absolutely.
get locked into a platform like you're talking about, whether it's an Etsy or a Twitter or a Shopify, you're at kind of the whims of what they're doing.
Absolutely.
That's a little bit different in the
that
WordPress
company
world.
gets bought by somebody who then does all kinds of questionable things with it. And then here you are. Like I've been on Twitter for 15 years, right? Like I've been on Twitter since 2007. So I've been on Twitter like 15 years. And here I am, like with my like 15-year-old, like at Tiffany Twitter handle, because that's how long I've been on it. I got my first name. And now somebody's over here, like running it into the ground, making all kinds of questionable decisions, messing up the experience I have. And then I'm like, well, now what? Like half the people I know I met here. Like, now what do I do? And like, here I am, like, I got locked in. I said I wasn't going to get locked in, but here I am locked in. So yeah, I mean, that has like very practical considerations. There's people that I'm struggling to stay in touch with because I only knew them on Twitter, and like, how do I find them now?
Well, and you know, just a real direct one-to-one is a Shopify or an Etsy, a platform versus this. And you look at a lot of entrepreneurs, e-commerce merchants, start something, it blows up. It starts to really grow, and that lock-in down the stream really comes into play for sure. Like you start getting taxed on your success in a sense where you, like you said, to that own and locked in feature, where you go now.
Exactly.
With WordPress, we built a tool at iThemes that is a distiller brand that you can move websites very easily with, including at Nexcess brands, right?
Exactly. And you know, like you build something, you go viral, you're like, suddenly your Etsy store is going crazy. Now you have like, you know, transaction fees at Etsy. So the bigger you are, like the more your fees grow at Etsy. And so you have that problem, but also like maybe you never bought a domain name. So now everybody only knows where to find you on Etsy instead of getting a domain name. So now you've got to like figure out how to teach people to go somewhere else. Like if you want to move, like it's a real, I see this a lot of times too with like content creators and like Instagram. They're like, oh my gosh, Instagram's how I reach my audience. How are people going to find me if Instagram goes down? Y'all, that is a problem. Like you need a website. And it makes me nuts. Like a thing that just makes me like pound the table because I get so annoyed about it is, so you don't have like people, you can only have like one link on Instagram, right? It's in your bio, link in bio. And so people like pay money for a link in bio service and then like link to their website and a link in bio. And I'm like, what if I told you that you could just put a page on your website with the list of all your links and then put that link in your bio? And then you wouldn't be locked into yet another service, right? You don't have to get locked into there's the lock into Instagram, and then there's the lock into the thing that you did to like work around the limitations of Instagram. Just have websites, y'all. Just have websites.
It's in this partner of ours, same thing, built a huge audience on Instagram. But you gotta have a website, gotta have an email list that you're trying, things have evolved. There's other marketing opportunities, but I go, for me, website, email list that you can contact them, that you quote own. So if something shifts, but Tiffany, I'm interested too. You see all this, looking around Instagram, for instance, at some of the people that have got huge audiences, and I click those links and I think, okay, well, maybe they're what, at some point, how do they monetize that? And I go, and I want to get your thoughts on this and this whole creator economy. And what I think probably 10 years ago, we thought it's like bloggers and, we have a new name for it now, but the creator economy, where they use the platforms to get some initial buzz, but then, okay, what's the path to monetization? I mean, we're all passionate about what we do, but at some point you also need to, keep the lights on and pay the bills kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But I'm curious too, like seeing that you've been in WordPress a long time, seen in the web a long time, been a technologist, but like, what's your thoughts on that creator economy? Just like you said, okay, hey, here's a good point. Build your audience here. Hey, maybe not just a link tree or whatever it's called, but like, here's your website and all that. But what kind of trends and themes are you seeing in the foreseeable future that, you have thoughts on and ideas for as the creator economy builds?
I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people kind of fall back to newsletters, which is very cool and like retro, right? Like this idea of like email, like we've all got email. We neglected our email boxes for a while, but now it's back. Email's back, baby. I think that's really interesting. And we're still seeing like some consolidation there, right? Because then now it's like, oh, let's have a Substack. And like, okay, but now you're like locked into Substack, right?
Yeah.
Which is a little bit of a concern, but you can at least like export your subscribers out from Substack. Like if nothing else, like you can take your list with you, which I think is really great. Substack has put together like a really easy to use stack of things that you need to run a 4-page newsletter. And so they're popular for a reason, even if I still think people should have websites. But we are seeing that. And even within Substack, I'm starting to see people like branch out into like having websites like Ghost, which is another open source project. I'm seeing people do that instead. I think it's really interesting right now because we're in this moment where like the social media platforms are really starting to show the seams, and it's starting to feel like maybe we're on the edge of something. And I was just talking about this with a friend of mine the other day, and because he was saying like, man, like Google Reader died and it kind of killed RSS, right? Like, and nobody's figured that problem out since then. I'm like, well, no, because everybody just started aggregating through Twitter. Twitter's your new Google Reader, except now like Twitter is Twittering. And because then we all, and again, that's like that problem of consolidation. Like even Google Reader, which was aggregating sources, it was like the dominant RSS reader. And I don't know how to solve that problem of centralization, right? But I think it's very interesting that we're seeing people kind of move to newsletters, because then they at least know that they can contact you, and you can you can have more control of your audience that way. Well, I'm watching people like try out like Mastodon, and that's interesting. I don't know how that's going to go, because I feel like Mastodon is still, it's too difficult from like an administrative perspective. Like it's too difficult to start an instance, right? Still. I was talking about this actually in Post Status Slack the other day. I feel like a big reason that I ever got as far as I did with WordPress is because they had that 5-minute install so early on. Yep. Like even in 2004, it was easy enough to install that I could figure it out myself. And now, like, I tried to set up Mastodon, like just like on a Nexcess test account, and like we don't have a way to run that particular form of SQL that it uses, of SQL. And so like I would immediately stop and like, well, I can't, like this thing doesn't even, like, it has dependencies that aren't necessarily available everywhere. And then you have to, like, there's all this stuff that you have to do to set it up. And I'm like, and it all has to be done from the command line. So I feel like, these kind of like federated platforms where you run your own instance are going to have to put a lot of attention into installation and onboarding if they really want to take off. I think that's going to be a big thing.
What I take from this too is really going back to, if you're thinking about building a business, even if you're doing something for passion, all of a sudden you back in, you go, oh my gosh, I'm a business owner. The thought process here to me is make sure you understand what you own and what you're renting or borrowing for a time.
Yeah.
And just like you said, like, I think so much from I think we so much, by the way, benefit from decentralization, a la WordPress. You can copy it, you can fork it, can do whatever you want with WordPress. And there's power in that shift of power where another platform has the rules and regulations and policies that they change, like Instagram changing from more focus on video to compete with, let's say, a TikTok. And you go, well, and I'm not looking at my analytics all the time, but I look at likes, right? And I go, well, my likes went down quite a bit. Well, because I don't do video. I don't want to do video.
Right.
And then you go, there's a way to build, it seems like, build some initial audience, but make sure you have these off ramps into something, even like an email list, you said, much less complex to export your subscriber list and go to another platform than e-commerce, but be really choosy and picky about what you're doing, because when your business does continue to grow, you want to be able to grow with it in the right platform to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, you know, as like, there's a thing about decentralization is that there are a lot of problems that we are accustomed to having platforms solve for us that now we have to solve on our own in a decentralized situation. And so those of us who've been working in open source a long time and who work in tech, kind of like, we already understand that like moderation is a problem and you have to think about it. But you've got all these, like, for example, new Mastodon instance admins who've never really thought about moderation as like a problem that they have to solve. and you'd better, right? And so, and that's like, I think that's going to be a real adjustment for people to make, as we kind of like, if we're really going to see like the beginning of a decentralization here, like there's going to be a lot of like lessons that have to get relearned.
Yes. And when you said that about the 5-minute install, I raised my hand, because I go, that's why I loved WordPress. I didn't have to, what's a command line? What's the, you know, how do I upload, install, extract, set up my database? It was like that kind of simple. I've seen so many tools over the years that promise some decentralization, but it's great for the developers that know all those things. But for the everyday person, once that gets figured out, that 5-minute or click install, I think we're going to see some shifts in power.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if they pay more attention to that, I think you'll start to see a lot more adoption.
Tiffany, thanks so much for being on Post Status Draft today and sharing some of your background and obviously your vision, values, and then what you're doing over at Nexcess with Store Builder and the other products. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, my slightly less neglected these days personal blog is tiff.is. So tiff.is. You can find me there. As long as there's still a Twitter, you can find me on Twitter at Tiffany. And you can find me on Mastodon at Tiffany@theinternet.social.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tiffany.
All right. Thank you.